of soldiers. We have moved on an awful lot from that particular time, and this sends a totally and utterly the wrong message.
Just before 10 o'clock, witnesses reported hearing 2 long bursts of gunfire at the Mazarine Army Barracks in Antrim. 2 military personnel died, another 4 people were injured.
I heard 3 gunshots constantly, then it stopped, then there was another 2 after it, and that was it, totally over.
Condemnation of the attack has been swift.
Fine words, strong words of condemnation will never stop these terrorists. I demand once again that they are crushed, but I make also an appeal to the community to not only be resilient and have a resolve and determination to see this battle through to the very end, but also I beg them to allow the security forces to take on the terrorists.
Nobody has yet claimed responsibility, but security has been stepped up recently, a warning of an increased threat from those, in the words of Downing Street, who want to go against the wishes of the overwhelming majority of the people of Northern Ireland. Tonight, the British Prime Minister has said the government will do what it can to bring those responsible to justice. Northern Ireland's First Minister is postponing a visit to the United States. Emma North, BBC News.
Well, this incident happened some 5.5 hours ago. Let's get the very latest now from our correspondent Andy Moore, who's been following events. What are the latest details you're hearing?
There's a lot of confusing different accounts of what happened, but it seems that a pizza delivery van was involved in some way. And we heard earlier on from Geoffrey Robinson from the DUP, and he says he believes the gunman arrived in the pizza delivery van and then went into the entrance and started spraying the entrance with automatic gunfire. Other accounts say the gunmen weren't in the van, but they were in a vehicle that followed it through the gates. Yet other accounts talk about a taxi being involved in some way. But the 4 who are injured, we believe they include some civilian security guards. It's worth saying that there are no reports that these soldiers or security guards fired back in any way, and it seems no gunmen have been arrested, so we assume they're at large.
Now, of course, this is a very significant incident for Northern Ireland. It's going to have a fairly big impact on the political process there. What reaction have you heard so far from political leaders in Northern Ireland?
Well, from the political leaders in Northern Ireland, we've heard from Peter Robinson, the First Minister, who we heard there has postponed his trip to the USA. He said this was a terrible reminder of the events of the past. He said it was a futile act and it will not succeed. Not succeed, he means in undermining the stability of the coalition at Stormont. We've heard from the British Prime Minister, Gordon Brown. He said this was a terrible incident that we utterly condemn, and the Prime Minister's thoughts, first and foremost, are with the families of those killed and with those seriously injured in this attack. We've just heard from the Irish Prime Minister, Brian Cowan, who said a tiny group of evil people cannot and will not undermine the will of the people to live in peace together. So we've had a lot of comment from people across the political spectrum in Northern Ireland. We haven't heard yet from Sinn Féin.
There's been a sort of peace in Northern Ireland for a fair amount of time now, although there have been suggested incidents of attacks. Why has it suddenly ramped up now?
Well, it's worth reminding ourselves that this is the first soldier killed in Northern Ireland in 12 years. The last soldiers patrolling on the streets, that was 2 years ago. But nonetheless, there have been attempts by dissident Republicans to undermine the peace. Last year, there were attacks on 2 serving police officers. Last month, a £300 bomb was found and defused. That was an attack aimed at an army barracks, we believe. Just last week, we heard from Sir Hugh Orde about the danger of dissident Republicans, and he said he was calling for help from the Special Reconnaissance Regiment. So he was putting the people of Northern Ireland on high alert of an attack just like this.
OK, Andy Moore, our correspondent following events. Thank you very much indeed for now. Well, our Northern Ireland political editor, Mark Devonport, gave me his assessment of the shooting a little earlier on.
There has been indications for some time that dissident Republican groups were trying to kill a member of the security forces, a police officer or a member of the army. In this case now they have succeeded in their aim with 2 military personnel dead. And you've just heard, I think in a statement that I just heard you reading out there, that the First Minister Peter Robinson has now decided to postpone a trip to the United States, which was due to begin tomorrow. And instead he's going to review the situation here in Northern Ireland. Now, my reading in that is that it doesn't actually sort of pose any threat to the stability of the coalition at Stormont. It's rather that he maybe feels that it would be inappropriate to be heading abroad immediately after an incident of this magnitude.
Paramilitary attacks have been pretty rare the last couple of years compared to the heights of the troubles in Northern Ireland, but it seems that in the past few months there has been an upsurge in fairly violent activity. What happens now? Where do we go from here?
Well, obviously, there's going to be a debate about whether security has to be increased around bases like this. You know, the statement from Peter Robinson has said that in the DUP's view, the Chief Constable's decision to bring in specialist army reconnaissance units has been vindicated by the fact that clearly there was this severe threat as demonstrated by the attack earlier on during the course of the evening. There has been a debate about that, with Sinn Féin being critical of the Chief Constable and saying it was a bit of an overreaction and it was taking Northern Ireland back to the old days. But you know, this has really, I suppose, to that extent, you know, moved things along. That there clearly is a threat out there that has to be combated. On a political level, though, these groups still have relatively small support. Peter Robinson in his statement was saying that their campaign will not succeed, and I think that we'll be seeing fairly strong condemnation probably from Sinn Féin and all the other parties coming in over the next few minutes and hours.
Strong condemnation you're expecting from them. What do you expect the people of Northern Ireland will say about this?
Well, I think the people of Northern Ireland will simply be dismayed that this attack has succeeded. I mean, it's been clear that in the past few months there have been attempts, really stretching back over the last year to 18 months by dissident groups to carry out an attack of this kind. I can recall one incident where an off-duty police officer was attacked as he tried to deliver his children to school. There have been other attacks in which there have been sort of lucky escapes from security force members. But I think the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland will be dismayed, because this really has been thought in recent years to be a thing of the past, something that Northern Ireland have put behind it, and people do not, in general terms, want to see any kind of return to this at all.
Do you think that this is in any way a direct reaction to the comments of Hugh Ward, Northern Ireland's most senior police officer? Because he, of course, said in the last day that there were groups out there threatening this kind of attack.
Well, I mean, it's hard to know whether this is a sort of an immediate reaction to the publicity about the Chief Constable's comments and the publicity about the recall of special army surveillance units, or whether it's simply, as it were, proof of the Chief Constable's warning that the threat was severe and that these groups were planning these attacks. So, you know, you're dealing, I suppose, with sort of a chicken and egg situation there. I suspect in order to have the capability to mount an attack of this kind, that the planning would have been going on for quite some time, rather than necessarily being something put together in the short term in the light of those comments.
And at first light, of course, in the morning in Northern Ireland, where do you think the finger's going to point?
Oh, I think certainly in terms of the attacks, the finger is already being pointed by politicians from across the spectrum at dissident Republicans. It appears to be the work of one or other of those groups. It's still, I would have thought, far too early to say which particular faction.
The attack comes just days after a specialist undercover army unit was deployed to carry out surveillance operations on dissident Republican groups. Unionist politicians say Northern Ireland's Chief Constable did what he could.
Hugh Ward has been faithful in that he has been warning this last number of months about the heightened threat. Sadly, he's been proved correct, but it is also was correct when he was seeking to bring in extra forces to get the information, to gather the information to try and stop the attacks.
The dissident Republican groups opposed to the peace process have been active before, mounting both gun attacks and attempted bombings, but nothing recently has been as deadly as this. Northern Ireland's political leaders have postponed a trip to the United States. They had been due to leave today to talk of progress, of changed times. Instead, they must deal with a reminder of darker days. Julian O'Neill, BBC News.